Richard via shopdapp.com. Hi there, I have a 2009 CC with about 140,000 on it. I replaced the rear main seal a few months ago, and after that I thought it was having some fuel issues, so I replaced the high pressure fuel pump and the module. I kept getting the P2293 code after changing both components. I hooked my car to a VACCOM yesterday and all it said was fuel pump intermittent and random misfires. Cleared all the codes this morning, CEL came back on with cylinders 1 in 3 misfires and random multiple misfires. After reading some of the above comments, it's looking more like an injector than a low pressure fuel pump in the tank. Your thoughts?
All right, Richard, so your issue P2293 on a CC with 145K. Let's start with this. The fact that your misfires on 3 different cylinders, first I would check the misfire counter to make sure that it's not consistent on one specific cylinder. You would need a VACCOM to do that. To track down if you have a single cylinder. Generally, if you have an injector failure, it's going to be on either, generally one specific cylinder. The other thing I would say is at 145K, it could be a carbon buildup issue with a cold start misfire. I don't know. I don't really have more details specifically from you about if this is a cold start misfire or if this is a constant misfire. But diagnosing further into that would be an option. And I'm also making the assumption, and maybe this was not the right assumption to make, that you've already looked into ignition coils and spark plugs on that. I assume you probably have. If you haven't, you should always start there. Check out the video we have talking about that, and you will want to swap coils and plugs around to see if the misfire moves if you haven't replaced them already. Aside from that, that would be your misfire related stuff. The other thing is, you said you had your rear main replaced. I wonder, did you replace the PCV valve when that happened? Because a vacuum leak can also often result in a poor running condition and misfires. So vacuum leaks often result in misfires, so you would want to make sure you have a good PCV valve on the car, as well as, I know there are some circumstances where intake manifolds can cause leaks, which would also result in a misfire code. But I think the intake manifold, don't start with that one. That's probably the least likely. And then going into the fuel pump issue, the P2293 fault should be, and that's kind of a generic code, but the actual fault should be for the N276 valve, which is actually the solenoid valve that controls the high pressure fuel pump. It's mounted on the top and actually controls the flow for high pressure fuel. So that's what that fault is pointing to. The one problem I have, and you said you have a new high pressure pump and you have a new fuel pump module. So obviously you can rule those out, assuming you use quality parts on there, either let's say Bosch, which we offer a Bosch high pressure fuel pump, or the genuine one. So if those are good quality parts and those are fine, I would say the next step would be to first see if it's having a fuel supply issue sporadically, which you would have to pull the lines off, the low pressure lines off, to see if maybe you had a sporadic issue where the low pressure pump was not supplying enough fuel, which is why it thinks that that valve isn't operating properly, because the electric pump in the tanks don't have any sensors on them to determine when they're not flowing properly. So it might result in a fault for the high pressure fuel pump solenoid, even though it's a low pressure pump that isn't delivering enough fuel. Aside from that, I've heard of people who have replaced all those things and still have those problems. The next thing you would want to look at would be the fuel pressure sensors. Though there are 2 of them in that system, I believe. There should be one on the fuel pump itself, or on the one part of the rail, and then one part of the other. One of them is just a high pressure sensor, and then one of them is just a standard low pressure sensor. So that would be the route to go with those, but all of those issues definitely require more tracking down to determine what's going on, and hopefully you can resolve your issue. Thank you so much for watching. If you know somebody who could benefit from the information talked about in this video, be sure to share it with them. For parts for your VW or Audi, check out shopdapp.com.